You're listening to Rise to Your Purpose, a personal and spiritual development podcast for female entrepreneurs with a mission.
We're your hosts, Brandie and Natalie.
You're listening to episode 27 of Rise to Your Purpose, and today we dive into identifying your God-sized dream and stepping into action to make it become a reality. We have a special guest, Lauren Apple, who specializes in helping mothers identify and step into their God-sized dreams. So we're so excited to bring this to our online and network marketing, women of faith community. So we hope you enjoy. Hi, friends and purpose partners. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm your host, Brandie. For those of you who are new to the community, I'm one of the founders of Victorious Entrepreneurs Rising, the Rise to Your Purpose program, and this podcast. And my passion is really helping women of faith in the online marketing space align their values with their business so that you can create a mission-driven business with a kingdom impact. So I'm really excited to introduce you to our guest today, Lauren Apple. Lauren is the owner and founder of the Ministry Motherhood with Lauren Apple, and she helps moms with God-sized dreams bring them to reality. And so I love when we get to talk about God-sized dreams. So today we're going to be discussing how to identify your own God-sized dream and some action steps that you can begin to bring those dreams into reality. So Lauren, thank you so much for being on this live and this podcast. I would love for you to share with me and the audience a little bit about your background and how you began your ministry with motherhood.
Yes, thank you, Brandie. I'm so excited to be here. So my background story can go on forever. Probably all of us can talk forever, right, about that. But I'll just do a really quick overview. My husband and I were in ministry for over a decade. We pastored together. We did youth ministry, and then he did some executive ministry, and then we did some church planning and had our hands on lots of different things. But I was called into ministry when I was 16 years old, and I felt like, okay, that's it. I'm going to be a pastor forever. And I thought, man, I'll be a youth pastor forever. It doesn't matter how old I am, and I'm going to be a single woman. And we all know that God works differently, right? Yeah. So I ended up marrying a pastor, and then we ended up pastoring together and doing all these things. And through a long journey of God kind of moving in our hearts and doing different things, he led us through a process of getting us to a place where we stepped out of vocational ministry. And in the midst of doing all of that, we moved across the country, and I really just got into the whole online space when I was really trying to find something that was flexible to work around my husband's schedule, because he was in retail management, which is the craziest hours ever. And so I wanted to have flexibility to be around for my kids and in a new place and all of that, but also bring income in. So I really started in the online space as a virtual assistant and started serving other clients and kind of working in that way. And I really quickly came to a place where I just felt like, man, I'm not using my gifts. Like I am missing something here. And there was definitely a lot of healing and like freedom that came out of stepping out of vocational ministry, because that is such like a hard burden to bear and mantle to carry for the people that you serve. And you should pray for your pastors every day when you think about them, because they have a lot on their shoulders. But in stepping out of that, I really just felt like there was a big part of me and my calling and my gifts that God had put inside of me that I just was missing. And I was serving in the church and I was getting involved in that kind of stuff, and that was great. But I still felt like I was just on the cusp of what God had for me, that there was more. I was only scratching the surface there. And so I really just went through this process of starting to just ask the Lord what it is he wanted of me. And I think that we come to this place a lot of times as women where we feel like we have to have all this clarity, right? We need to know right now how are you going to get me here, you know? But in reality, that's not how God works, because I know me, if God gave me the big plan, I would say, well, here's a shortcut I can take. So why don't I just jump ahead and do this? And I would mess it all up, right? But God wants to take us through that process. And so it just was like a long process of trying to figure out, how does my online business fit into this? And I ended up with some clients that I really got to minister to and really love throughout some hard seasons that they were going through and pray for them. And it ended up being more of like a coaching position than me actually being, a virtual assistant for them and helping them set up systems and helping them kind of realign their business with their dreams as well as with their life. And through all of that, God just began to speak to me like, Lauren, this is what I want you to do. Your ministry, your calling, you thought was this perspective of being a pastor, right? Because we only see what we see. But really it was me being able to help other people go through processes and figure out how to reach their dreams, right? And how to figure that out for yourself. We get so much in our heads. And then I think the other thing is in the midst of motherhood, like I'm a mom of 4 kids, 9 and under. So we have all the craziness happening here, which is a fun craziness, but wild. And I hope you don't hear them while we're talking here.
You're fine.
But in the midst of all of that, you kind of lose yourself too in mothering. You lose, those dreams that you had before you became a mom, and you start to focus on the most important, right? Because your ministry is to your kids, but not all of us are called to just minister in our home. Some of us, if we feel like, man, we want more than that, or we're called to more than that, or God has different gifts in us that are not to be used just in our home. And so we have to figure out this balance. And I don't know if we ever reach a balance, but it's more of like seasons you walk through, right?
Yes.
But we have to figure out how are we going to minister at home well, and how are we going to minister in the way that God's asking us to have an impact on the world. And that's really what I've been, kind of learning systems and processes and ways to really walk through and manage my life, my motherhood, and my ministry, and where God has really encouraged me and given me the amazing opportunity to help other women do that as well.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about your background and how you got into the space. I can totally relate to that yearning and calling to be more outside of the home, as as important as it is to be ministering inside of your house. As you know, I have a 6-month-old right now, and I was like, I love being a mom, and he is such a blessing and definitely an answer to our prayers. At the same time, I love serving the women in my community, and I have that strong desire still to show up for them. But like you said, there's a balance, and I don't know that you ever reach a balance. It's more like holistic or working synergistically together, and there's definitely that give and take. And I've been learning that over these last actually 7 months now, how to like be a mom and be a businesswoman and an entrepreneur, and but still also have time to take care of myself, because if we don't take care of ourselves, then
Absolutely,
we can't serve anybody, right? So I love that you brought that up too. How did you go about identifying your God-sized dream, and how can, if somebody's listening and they're like, I feel like God's trying to tell me something, but I don't know what my God-sized dream or how to identify that?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think a lot of women, we know what it is that God is calling, or what those big things that make us excited and that almost make us scared too, but we're afraid, right? It's all like a mindset thing. We're afraid to speak it out. We're afraid to think that we're worthy to accomplish that, or we're able to accomplish that, or we're capable. And so I think it really is wrestling. And I think as a mom too, is again, we push that back. So we forget about it because we're focusing on these more important things, right? These more urgent things, keeping kids alive, right? Which is a lot more important and urgent than those dreams that we thought we had in our heart like decades ago, right? And so we have to remind ourselves, okay, what were those stirrings that God whispered to us about? Because it doesn't stop. When he gives us a desire, when he gives us a dream, he continues to urge that. And the Holy Spirit is such a gentleman, like he doesn't force anything on us, but he gets more persistent, and more urgent, and reminds you of things. And every once in a while, I like to say, gives me a little kick in the butt, right? Yeah. If I continue to avoid what I'm doing. But I think that is really recognizing the things that we know are there and speaking them out loud, but also being aware of the times in our lives where we saw somebody else doing something, and the thought of us doing that, made us anxious and excited, and, all those feelings where it's like, could I really do that? Got you super emotional. I think that is really, just God's starting to show you some of those visions. And it's not going to look the same as someone else, but it's part of, that desire. You saw someone speak on stage in front of a bunch of women, and that's something that you desire, right? You read a book and it touched your life, and you're like, man, I wish I could write a book that touched someone else's life. And a lot of times we push that off as just jealousy or fantasy, you know, it's just like we're wishing the grass is greener on the other side. But in reality, that's like desires God has put in your heart. And you'll see other people have desires that you don't, you know, so you'll recognize, okay, well, that's just not a normal human desire, right? That some other people are passionate about that and I'm not. So I think it really is just becoming aware of those feelings, becoming aware of the past, the things that we've seen in the past that have really gotten us excited or stirred us up. Maybe it is even just like a movement. Maybe there is a certain struggle in the world that you're really broken for and you have a heart for or you're burdened by. I think it's also looking at your experiences. What has God brought you through? Because a lot of times our testimonies is going to be a big part of our platform of how we're going to impact the world, is sharing those stories and how God has brought us through so we can encourage others to do that.
Yeah, that is so true. And I can totally relate to that as well. As what God has brought me through overcoming Crohn's disease and surgery and like being severely ill for like 3 years. And then the women he's brought into my life to minister to after the fact, now that I'm healthy, I can turn around and like, hey, you can get through this and be through that too. And then my own infertility struggles, again, I feel like he's always just put me in this coaching space to be like, turn around and help that person next to you. And now we're in the online marketing coaching space. So I think I'm like, hello, that's like definitely a sign, right? It's not the fact that it keeps happening over and over. Right. For me, that was kind of my sign of like, hey, God wants you to be in this space and help those people behind you come up and also be successful in different ways. So I think that is really important as you are trying to figure out and identify what your God-sized dream is, that you're just being still. Like you have to take that time to just allow yourself to be still and hear his whisper, because he's not going to be in the chaos. He's not going to be in the noise. He's not going to be in the fire. I love that story of Elijah where he sees God for the first time. He's not in the earthquake or the fire or the wind. He's in the whisper. He's in that still moment. So making sure as women, we are carving out that time to just be still and listen to God's sweet whispers in our ears and have that intimate time with him. But then also, like you said, what are those urges? What are those like, sparks that come up when you're involved with something or you see something, like those little nudges? Take note, look back at where you've had those little nudges in your life, and those will point you to your God-sized dreams. And then I also love what you said, like we're afraid to speak it out loud, because I was afraid to enter into like the online marketing coaching space, even though I've had coaching opportunities in different parts of my life, but it didn't look like this. And I was afraid about what would other people think about me if I shifted my entrepreneur journey into this space, and almost like, would I be in trouble? Like, I don't even know, like all these fears that were coming from the enemy to keep me from reaching my God-sized dreams. So be aware of what is it the enemy speaking, or is it God speaking? And you're going to know that from, okay, is it irrational? Is it a fear? Or versus, is it peaceful? Is it pursuing you to help other people? I think, and I have another podcast where I talk about God's voice versus the enemy's voice and what those differences are. So I think that's so important that we're just taking the time to actually identify God's voice and align that with the God-sized dreams. So what tips and strategies have you taken, or would you encourage our listeners and viewers to actually start taking action?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is the number one big strategy, right? Start taking action. But I think overall, it's beyond just action. Is start saying yes to yourself. And I think as moms and as Christian women, a lot of times we like have had this whole idea of we need to say no and set up boundaries and all these things. And yes, that's great. But at the same time, like we say yes to everybody else. We say yes to our kids. We say yes to the things that we think are the most important, and we sacrifice our own yeses, and when God has put things inside of you and when he has called you to more, you need to start saying yes to that, right? Say yes to those instincts. It's really easy to make excuses not to take the time and not to set up the disciplines and the structure in order for you to move forward, not just as your dream, but move forward as growing, right? Growing as a mom and growing as a Christian and growing as a follower of Christ and becoming better and learning more. And I think that's what God is constantly calling us to. And in reality, our motherhood benefits from that, right? Our motherhood gets so much better But it's so easy. It's so easy to be like, well, I'm not really going to carve out time for myself because I should spend more time with my kids, or I should do this. I'm not going to invest money in myself because I should really invest it in my kids. When they have all they need, right? They don't need all those millions of toys or the highest end thing of this for baby supplies. And it amazes me how like quickly and easily it is for moms to like spend thousands of dollars on a brand new baby who's not going to remember any of this stuff that they touched or were a part of, right? But yet we struggle so much to just simply invest in ourselves and to help ourselves grow. And whether that's like reading and learning, but really I think the biggest thing is like God has called you to write a book, then make a discipline every day, a timed, scheduled discipline to just write. You are like, I don't know what I'm supposed to write about. And so I'm so stuck and I need all this clarity. Well, God's going to give you that when you start taking obedient steps of action towards what he wants you to do. So you write down. And when he opens the door and says, hey, here is the revelation of the book you're supposed to write, you're going to have almost all of it done. You know, you're going to have it right before you because you took that discipline and you were ready for that next step that God has for you. And I think that's what it looks like in our dreams. You know, God's calling you to start an online business, then start taking action towards that, you know, start walking out towards it, learn as much as you can and take steps of obedience as God calls you to take them. And the next step he's going to make clear to you, because again, he's that process, you know, and he's going to refine it as we go. Like we think we have clarity, but in reality, we don't really know where God's taking us. And so he just continues to refine it and refine it and refine it as we go. And we have to take the action. You know, I love the story of the farmer in the Bible where it says he plants the seeds and he wakes up or goes to bed and wakes up every single day. He's waking up and it grows and he doesn't know how. You know, it's because he's just doing the work that God has called him to do until God opens up another thing. And it's like the Holy Spirit's going to get that soil ready, right? He's going to refine every opportunity that you need. He's going to help you experience what you want. And he's going to give you the opportunities to open the doors for the next step. But we just have to go through the process and we have to continue to put one foot in front of another and work towards it and make goals and accomplish those goals, right? And make bigger goals and accomplish those goals. And then you'll get there. You'll get to those dreams. You don't want to look back like I did in, you know, within 10 years of my mothering. And I was like, man, I haven't grown that much. Like, what did I accomplish in these last 10 years? You know, because I was so focused on the day-to-day of mothering that I forgot all these things that God had called me to. And I didn't take action. I kept making excuses. Well, I'll have time for that in a different season when my kids are older or when we get through this process, when I don't have a newborn at home anymore. You know, it's just so hard. And it's easy to make those excuses. But if I were to say the little yeses every day and wake up early and get disciplined and put time into my schedule to really take care of myself and to go towards the dreams that God had for me, I would be so much further along today than I am now, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to also point out that the joy really is in the journey and you're never really arriving, but because God's always going to continue to grow that dream and help you get to that next level and that next step. And so don't be afraid of the process. And I love the saying, this is what it looks like as it's coming together, and be open and unattached to the outcome. Just start taking imperfect action. And that next step is just going to automatically reveal itself to you at the perfect timing. But you have to take that first step.
Right.
Obviously the hardest, but you know,
hardest.
Something in motion stays in motion, right? So just taking that action step. And I also like what you said, like we become better mothers when we're also developing ourselves. And I just think back to, yeah, my son's only 7 months old, but how many coaching calls has he said on? How many podcasts has he been on my lap listening? And he may not understand the words yet, but he's going to feel that energy and he's going to just have that positive vibe. And he's going to be surrounded by all of these wonderful, beautiful, just lights in the world. And because I'm putting myself out there like that, he's just going to get that beautiful kind of wash over onto him as well. And so I think that is also so important to know. If you are called to minister outside of the home, then just take that imperfect action. And I don't want to diminish those who are just called to minister inside the home, because that is a huge job and one that is so important, especially in today's world. Like everything needs to start at the home to have those successful families and units and just successful human beings to go out into the world and create more successful human beings that love and care for each other. And so I don't want to diminish those of you who are listening and maybe you are like, no, my God-sized dream is just to be a mom and be in the home, and that is beautiful. But there are those of us who are crazy and we're like, let's add 10 other things to our schedule. And so this is for you guys who are wanting to, if you're feeling that tug to also serve outside of the home. Hopefully this conversation has been beneficial to you. And those of you who have been following my journey, you know I'm on a hashtag self-love is journey this year because I was at the place where I was not taking care of myself. I was putting everybody else's needs before me. And so this year I've really been intentional about saying yes to myself and learning what is self-love. And the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, okay, God's given us these temples, our bodies to care for. And it's not selfish to say yes. It's not selfish to go on a walk and pray. It's not selfish to just take a minute to breathe. It's not selfish to just read a book and grow yourself. And so what would you say is your like self-love, self-care that you do for yourself, Lauren?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that. So definitely the saying yes is a big thing of saying yes to myself. But I think for me, it really is like making sure that I'm in tune with myself, you know, and in tune with my emotions and my feelings, because really quickly we can get caught up in things and not recognize, oh, I'm a little off. So I need to just take a breather. And I think silence for me is one of the biggest disciplines that is so necessary, especially as a mom of 4. My house is always loud. So making sure that I take opportunities, and even if that is going for a walk, or for me sometimes for a run, like that's the only time that I am just like have silence and being able to do that so that I can be in tune with what the Lord is speaking to me, but also with how I'm feeling. I think it's really easy to forget the processes you're going through emotionally when you're in the midst of chaos, right? You just kind of push it off and you don't realize it until you get to a breaking point. And so if you can become aware of that stuff earlier on, then you can really work through it a lot quicker and easier and without hurting and having to apologize to so many people after the fact, right? So that is the biggest thing for me, is really being able to have a discipline of being in tune with my emotions. Journaling is a big part of that too. When I write down things, things will come out that I'm not always speaking out loud. So that's a huge self-love discipline as well.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren. Where can people find you if they want to work with you and help identify what their God-sized dream is? So how can people find you?
Yes. Well, the biggest thing is you can join my group on Facebook. It's Ministry Motherhood. It's just the plus symbol, but you can also type Ministry and Motherhood and it'll show up in the group search to have you be a part of that. We would love to have you be a part of our community.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. It's been so enlightening to have you on the podcast with me, and hopefully people will join your group and find you. So thank you again.
Thank you, Brandie.
Rise Your Purpose will be a weekly podcast. Our hope is to inspire and educate you on your entrepreneurial journey to help you fuel your passions, live your purpose, and build a business that works for you.
You can subscribe, rate, and comment on any podcast app. We'd love to hear from you. It makes us so happy to see you tuning in to the show. So if you're on Instagram, let us know what your favorite part of the show was by taking a screenshot of the episode you tuned into and tag us at Live Victorious on your story. Let us know what your favorite quote or takeaway from the episode was so that we can be inspired to keep creating content like this for you.
To learn more about us and get involved with our community of mission-driven entrepreneurs, join our Facebook group, Purpose Partners, where we partner together in faith and business. So until next time, build a business that works for you and stay in alignment with your mission.